The first thing Deborah Del Mastro heard was not an explanation. It was not a warning. It was not even a demand for money. It was the sound of a voice she believed belonged to her daughter, crying, panicked, and coming through a phone call she did not yet understand. The call came from an unknown number in May of 2026, somewhere in California's Bay Area. On the other end was a man Deborah did not know. He told her there was someone she needed to listen to. Then he made a claim so immediate and frightening that it left almost no room for calm verification. He said her adult daughter, Sarah, had been kidnapped. According to reports, the caller claimed Sarah had been taken by a Mexican cartel after seeing something she was not supposed to see. There is no public evidence confirming that a cartel was actually involved. No official document has established that part of the story as fact. But in the moment of the call, the claim served a clear purpose. It created fear. Then came the voice. Deborah later said she heard what she believed was Sarah, crying, panicked, apologizing, and sounding as though she was in immediate danger. To a stranger, it might have been only audio. To a mother, it was something much more powerful. It sounded familiar. And that familiarity is what makes this case so disturbing. For decades, a voice on the phone was one of the most intimate forms of proof. You could doubt a text message. You could question an email. You could hang up on a suspicious number. But if you heard what sounded like your own child crying for help, most people would not immediately think about artificial intelligence, voice cloning, or federal fraud statistics. For many parents, the question would not be technical. It would be immediate. How do I keep my child alive? Deborah's case is not just a story about one phone call. It is a story about what happens when criminals target one of the last signals people still trust, the sound of someone they love. The details that have been publicly reported are simple on the surface, but deeply unsettling when placed in order. Deborah received the call. A man claimed Sarah had been kidnapped. Deborah heard a voice she believed was her daughter's. The caller kept pressure on her, giving urgent instructions. He reportedly told her not to speak, to check whether anyone was near her, to get dressed, to leave, and to act immediately. That pressure continued for approximately 5 hours. During that time, Deborah followed instructions and sent $5,400 to Mexico from multiple transfer locations. Later, she was told that Sarah would be released at a supermarket. Deborah went there. Sarah was not there. Then Deborah did the one thing the pressure of the call had kept pushing away. She called her daughter directly. Sarah answered. She was safe. She was at work. There had been no kidnapping. And in that instant, the emergency described on the phone collapsed into something almost as devastating. The realization that the voice, the threat, the urgency, and the hours of obedience had all been part of a fraud. But that left one question that still has not been answered publicly. What exactly did Deborah hear? The case has been described in news reports as a suspected AI voice scam. Deborah herself believed the voice may have been generated or manipulated using artificial intelligence. Experts have explained that scammers can sometimes create convincing voice clones from short samples of audio, including clips taken from social media or other recordings. But in Deborah's specific case, there is no public forensic audio analysis confirming that the voice was generated by AI. There is no publicly available police report proving how the audio was created. There is no court document identifying the suspects, the software, the source of the voice sample, or the exact technical method used. And that uncertainty is part of the story. Because the fear does not depend on absolute certainty. It depends on possibility. By the time Deborah's case reached national attention, federal agencies had already been warning Americans about this kind of threat for years. In March of 2023, the Federal Trade Commission warned consumers that scammers could use a short clip of a family member's voice to clone it and make a fake emergency sound real. The advice was direct. Do not trust the voice alone. Verify the story by contacting the person through a known number. But advice written calmly on a government website is very different from a voice on the phone claiming your child is in danger. That is the gap scammers exploit. Not ignorance, not carelessness, human instinct. The call Deborah received appears to fit a broader pattern known by several names: family emergency scams, grandparent scams, distress scams, and virtual kidnapping scams. The exact labels vary, but the structure is often similar. A criminal claims someone close to the victim is in immediate danger. The victim is pressured to keep the call going, avoid outside contact, and send money quickly. The purpose of that pressure is to isolate the victim from verification. And in cases where artificial intelligence is added to that pattern, the scam becomes more personal. A fake emergency can become a familiar voice. A threat can become a family crisis. A criminal script can become something that feels impossible to ignore. If stories like this make you question how much of the truth can disappear between a phone call and an unanswered question, consider subscribing. This channel follows the details most people overlook, especially when technology begins changing what ordinary people can trust. Deborah Del Mastro was not the first person to describe a call like this. In April of 2023, Jennifer DeStefano, a mother from Arizona, reported receiving a call saying that her daughter Brianna had been kidnapped. She said she heard a voice that sounded like her daughter crying and pleading for help. In that case, no money was transferred, but the emotional impact was strong enough that Jennifer later submitted written testimony to the United States Senate during a hearing about artificial intelligence abuses. Her statement described something many parents would understand immediately. Even after someone mentioned the possibility that it could be an AI scam, she did not immediately accept that explanation. She said the voice seemed to carry crying, emotion, and inflection. It sounded like a daughter in distress. That is the core problem. People are often told to be skeptical of technology, but the human brain is not built to calmly analyze the voice of someone it loves, while that voice appears to be begging for help. In the past, scams often depended on bad grammar, strange emails, suspicious payment links, or clumsy impersonations. Many people were trained to look for mistakes. But synthetic media changes the rules. A scam does not have to be perfect in every detail if it can trigger panic at the right moment. A frightened person does not investigate the same way a calm person does. They react. They search for the fastest way to stop the threat. They focus on the person they believe is in danger. According to federal reporting, artificial intelligence has become a growing part of cyber-enabled fraud. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center reported that in 2025, it received 22,364 complaints referencing AI, with adjusted losses of more than $893 million. That figure does not represent voice cloning alone. It includes many kinds of crimes where AI was referenced, including investment fraud and other schemes. But the report specifically noted distress scams in which voice cloning was used to imitate family members during emergencies. The same report indicated that distress scams involving likely voice cloning caused more than $5 million in losses in 2025. Those numbers are large, but they can also make the problem feel distant. Deborah's story brings it back to one room, one phone, one mother, and one impossible choice. If she hung up and the call was real, she might believe she had failed her daughter. If she stayed on the line and obeyed, she might be walking deeper into a trap. That is the cruelty of this type of fraud. It turns caution into risk. It makes verification feel dangerous. It forces the victim to make decisions under pressure, while the caller controls the pace. And in Deborah's case, the pressure reportedly lasted for hours. The caller did not simply make a demand and disappear. He stayed on the line. He gave instructions. He kept the situation moving. Deborah was reportedly directed to go to multiple places to send the money. The longer the call continued, the harder it became to step outside the story being presented to her. This is where the case becomes harder to dismiss as just another scam. The most dangerous part may not have been technology alone. It may have been the combination of technology, fear, and timing. A convincing voice can open the door. Urgency can keep the victim inside. Isolation can prevent correction. Threats can suppress questions. And every minute that passes can make it harder to stop and say, something is wrong. Authorities have warned about these patterns before. The FBI has described virtual kidnapping scams in which criminals use urgency, threats, and false proof of life to make a victim believe a loved one has been taken. In one public alert, the Bureau warned that criminals were using altered photos and videos from social media to create false proof in kidnapping schemes. That alert was about visual media, not Deborah's specific voice call. But the underlying method is similar. Create a terrifying emergency, prevent independent contact, and demand payment before the victim has time to verify. The modern version of the scam does not need a real kidnapping. It needs enough believable fragments to make the victim afraid to test the story. A name, a relationship, a voice, a threat, a deadline, and perhaps most importantly, pressure not to disconnect. The moment Deborah finally called Sarah directly, the truth appeared almost instantly. Sarah was not being held. She was not in Mexico. She was not waiting in a supermarket. She was safe at work. That fact raises a painful question. If verification was so simple, why did it take 5 hours? The answer is not stupidity. It is pressure. The effect of the call was to keep Deborah away from the one action that would expose the lie. Calling Sarah directly would have ended the illusion. Contacting another family member might have interrupted the panic. Speaking to law enforcement could have slowed the process. Even pausing long enough to think might have weakened the caller's control over the moment. The call did more than demand money. It created a version of reality Deborah had to respond to before she could verify it. For 5 hours, the caller's version of events had to feel more urgent than every other possibility. And the voice was the emotional anchor. What makes voice cloning especially unsettling is that it does not simply imitate information. It imitates presence. A password can be stolen. A photo can be copied. A name can be guessed. But a voice carries memory. It carries years of association. It carries the way a person sounds when tired, afraid, rushed, or upset. That is why federal agencies have begun treating synthetic voice scams as a serious consumer threat. The FTC has warned that scammers can take a small audio clip of someone's voice and use it to generate a fake recording. The agency has recommended that families verify emergencies through another channel and avoid sending money through methods often favored by scammers, such as wire transfers, cryptocurrency, or gift cards. Experts cited in coverage of Deborah's case have also recommended a family code word, something simple, private, and agreed upon before an emergency ever happens. The idea sounds almost old-fashioned. A secret word, a direct call, a pause before payment. But in a world where voices can be copied, old-fashioned verification may be one of the strongest defenses left. The strange thing is that the technology does not have to fool everyone. It only has to fool the right person at the right time. A calm listener might say the audio sounds suspicious. A forensic expert might analyze whether a recording shows signs of manipulation. A family member who was not under pressure might notice inconsistencies. But the victim is not hearing the call in a laboratory. The victim is hearing it inside a threat. That difference matters. Deborah's case also shows how difficult these crimes can be to investigate publicly. According to ABC7, Martinez police were investigating the case. But based on the available public information, no suspect has been identified. No arrest has been reported. No court record has been found. No recovery of the $5,400 has been publicly confirmed. The money was reportedly sent to Mexico, but the public record does not identify the transfer services, recipients, accounts, intermediaries, or locations involved. There are no public documents showing whether the funds were frozen, traced, or withdrawn. There is no known legal outcome. In cases like this, investigators may face practical obstacles, cross-border payments, incomplete recipient information, and phone numbers that do not easily lead back to a real identity. And if the scam involves synthetic media, investigators may also have to determine whether the voice was cloned, recorded, manipulated, or simply performed convincingly by another person. In Deborah's case, several possibilities remain open. The voice may have been AI-generated. It may have been a manipulated recording. It may have been real audio taken from somewhere else. It may have been a human imitation. None of these possibilities has been publicly confirmed, and that is why the case must be told carefully. It is not accurate to say, with certainty, that Sarah's voice was cloned by artificial intelligence. The confirmed fact is that Deborah believed she heard her daughter's voice. The case was reported as a suspected AI voice scam, and official agencies have already documented that voice cloning is being used in distress scams. That distinction matters, because panic thrives on certainty. Investigation depends on precision. What do you think is the most frightening part of this case? The possibility that a voice can be cloned, or the fact that the scam only needed a few hours of fear to work? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because this is not just a technical question, it is a human one. The rise of AI voice scams did not happen in isolation. It emerged alongside a broader explosion of impersonation fraud. According to the FTC, people in the United States reported $3.5 billion in losses to imposter scams in 2025. The agency also reported that total fraud losses reached about $16 billion that year, the highest figure it had recorded. Again, those numbers are not all AI voice scams. They include many forms of fraud, but they reveal the environment in which this case happened. Impersonation is no longer limited to pretending to be a bank, a government agency, a company, or a romantic partner. Criminals can now imitate signals people associate with intimacy and trust. A mother's recognition of her daughter's voice, a grandparent hearing a grandchild in distress, an employee hearing what sounds like a boss giving urgent instructions, a family member receiving what appears to be proof of life. The line between fraud and reality becomes thinner when the evidence arrives in a familiar sound. That is why the 2024 decision by the Federal Communications Commission was significant. The FCC determined that AI-generated voices in robocalls fall under the category of artificial voices in federal law, making certain uses illegal and opening the door for enforcement. That decision followed a separate incident involving robocalls that imitated President Joe Biden's voice in New Hampshire. The political context of that FCC decision was different from Deborah's case, but the principle was the same. Synthetic voices are no longer science fiction. They are a real tool being used to influence decisions. Some decisions are political, some are financial, and some are made in fear by a parent who believes a child may be in danger. Deborah's background adds another layer to the story. National coverage described her as a Navy veteran. That detail matters because it challenges a common myth about scam victims. People often imagine that only the naive are deceived. But these scams are not designed only for people who know nothing. They are designed for moments when emotion overwhelms process. Training can help. Awareness can help. But no one is immune to a perfectly timed emergency. That is especially true when the fraud is built around family. The caller in Deborah's case reportedly claimed Sarah had been taken after seeing something she should not have seen. That detail made the alleged kidnapping sound connected to something larger, dangerous, and beyond ordinary control. The mention of a cartel intensified the threat. Whether or not any cartel was involved, and there is no public evidence that one was, the allegation raised the stakes. It made the threat sound larger, more organized, and more dangerous. This is a familiar element in coercive scams. The story does not have to survive careful investigation. It only has to survive the moment of decision. And during that moment, Deborah was not evaluating a case file. She was listening to a voice she believed belonged to her daughter. The most haunting part of the story may be the ending, because there is no dramatic arrest, no courtroom confrontation, no recovered money, and no confirmed identity of the people behind the call. There is only the phone call Deborah made afterward, the real call, the direct call, the one that revealed the truth. Sarah answered from work, and the impossible emergency was suddenly exposed as fiction. But the damage had already been done. The money was gone. The fear had been real. And the trust Deborah had placed in a voice had been used against her. For investigators, the unanswered questions remain practical. Who placed the call? Where were they operating from? How was the money routed? Was the voice created with AI? If so, what sample was used? Did the scammers find Sarah's voice online? Did they obtain it through another channel? Was it actually synthetic or something else entirely? For families, the questions are more personal. Would I recognize a fake version of someone I love? Would I hang up if I thought they were in danger? Would I be able to slow down while someone on the phone told me every second mattered? That is the fear at the center of this case. Not that technology has become perfect, but that it has become good enough to weaponize uncertainty. The official recommendations are simple, but they require courage in the moment. Verify through a known number. Contact the person directly. Use a family code word. Be cautious with urgent demands for wire transfers, cryptocurrency, or gift cards. Report suspected fraud to the proper authorities. But behind those recommendations is a harder truth. The next generation of scams may not look like scams. They may sound like family. They may use real names, real relationships, real fragments of public information, and voices that feel close enough to make doubt feel dangerous. Deborah Del Mastro's case remains unresolved in the public record. The police investigation was reported, but no public arrest or conviction has been found. The use of AI remains suspected, not forensically confirmed. The identity of the caller is unknown. The source of the voice is unknown. The path of the money is incomplete in public reporting. And yet the case already reveals something important. It shows that the old rules of trust are being tested faster than most households can adapt. For a long time, people were told not to believe everything they read online. Then they were told not to believe every photo or video they saw. Now the warning has moved into something much more intimate. Do not trust a voice alone, even when it sounds like someone you love. That does not mean people should become paranoid. It means they need a second step between fear and action. A pause, a code word, a separate call, a question only the real person would understand, a refusal to let a stranger control the entire conversation. Because in Deborah's story, the truth was not hidden behind advanced technology. It was on the other end of a direct phone call. Sarah was alive. Sarah was safe. Sarah was at work. But by the time that truth was reached, the scam had already done what it was designed to do. It had turned love into leverage. It had turned a voice into evidence. And it had turned 5 hours of fear into $5,400 sent across a border to people who, at least publicly, have not been identified. That is why this case matters beyond one family in California's Bay Area. It is a warning about the future of trust and about how quickly criminals can adapt when new tools become available. The unanswered question is not only whether AI was used in Deborah's call. The larger question is how many people will wait until after the money is gone to make the verification call. If this story stays with you, share it with someone who might need the warning before a phone call like this ever comes. And if you believe the smallest details can change the outcome of an investigation, subscribe and keep following the cases where technology, crime, and human trust collide. Because the next time an unknown number rings, the voice on the other end may sound familiar. And the most important thing you can do may be the hardest thing to do in that moment. Pause. Verify. Then act.